So, Rick, Fred spoke about the importance of culture, and clearly he's created a fairly unique culture there at Merit. Each of you have worked sort of spanning the spectrum of device companies and size, and starting with you, Rick, how would you rate the importance of culture, and how do you go about sort of instilling the culture that you envision?
I think it depends a fair amount on the stage of the company. Brand new companies don't focus on culture all that much. The culture comes from the leadership of the company itself, and you focus on things like gathering resources, gathering technology, developing products and management and so forth. But the CEO has to always be thinking about culture and thinking about what is the right culture for that stage of development. Early on, it's everybody has to work their tails off. Everybody's got to stay very focused. Everybody's got to be on the right path. As you get to bigger and bigger stages, you have to decide what is the culture your company needs to be. A lot of companies make the mistake of saying, well, we have to retain that startup culture. That's our goal. We're going to stay like we were when we were small. And I think that's often the incorrect strategy. I think you have to be very cognizant of what works for the company at the stage you're at. So therefore, culture management becomes more and more important as your company develops and gets bigger. When I was running a $500 million company, LifeScan, at one time, that was a significant part of my job. Managing culture, I would say, was a third of my job, and I spent a lot of time at it.
Wilson, I interviewed you a few years ago. And one of the things you said that stuck with me back then was that it's kind of hard to forecast beyond that 24-month horizon. I think Fred has his 25-year plan. You're now part of a Japanese company where they are famously far-seeing or aim to be. How are you now reconciling your view on that 24-month window with the situation you're in now?
With Japanese glasses on.
Is that?
Hello? Oh,
Okay, there we go.
With Japan. Hello? Hello? Okay.
There you go.
With Japanese glasses on, right? So it's, the 25-year, I kudos to him. I'm not sure how he can foresee technology and adjustments in the market in 25 years. But I think it's, from a Japanese perspective, they do tend to like to look at the long term and look at the strategy and have a very tough time redirecting once the strategy has been agreed to and consensus has been built. What the company's done a really nice job of going into 5-year planning cycles, and the purpose or the idea of having a non-Japanese CEO for the first time for one of their overseas businesses was to kind of redirect that and take shorter leaps in strategy. So we look at 24-month cycles now. We just did a strategic planning session about a year ago when I came on board. Looking at the next 24 months, 4 strategic imperatives, what's important, what isn't, and our budgets are born from that. So our priorities are determined and our values are all determined by the strategy. And if strategy is the road and kind of culture is the car on it, and roadkill is the good intentions. So we are really focusing on making sure that every decision we make is aligned with that those 24-month goals. But we do redirect at the 12-month point to kind of recalibrate what has been achieved and what has not been achieved.
What was attractive to you about the opportunity at Nihon Kohden?
Kind of the untapped market size. We're at our core a sensor company. We've spent the last nearly 70 years as innovators in SpO2 technology. We're really the IEEE just named us the original founders of SpO2 technology. But in EEG, in sleep, in IOM, in vital signs monitoring, each one of these components separately are really interesting. But as they further integrate outside of engineering silos, they become really care area focused, which is really where the markets have gone. So we can kind of reframe the debate from being each engineering piece or each subcomponent to really framed around the triple aim. So triple aim is only useful if it's framed within comparative effectiveness. So we think we are uniquely positioned, and that was what was really exciting to me, to take advantage of all these pieces.
Turning to you, Rick, I'm interested in the thinking behind ReShape's decision to essentially go direct to consumer instead of a traditional reimbursement route. Was there things about the U.S. reimbursement landscape that shaped that decision, or was it more just because of the product that you have?
It's really related to the product and the strategy of the company. But fundamentally, what we make is a non-surgical weight loss device that it's a balloon that resides in your stomach for a period of time and then is removed. We couple that with a behavior modification program that lasts for a full 12 months to try to change the patient's relationship with food, so not only can they lose a significant amount of weight, but they can keep it off. Well, a reimbursement company looks at this and he goes, well, temporary weight loss device, why would I reimburse that? Without realizing that this actually, the effect is not temporary. We actually are able to achieve a very long-term effect. But today, we don't have the ability to prove that sufficiently to get reimbursement, and we don't want it, frankly. There are plenty of patients who are willing to pay out of pocket for this technology, for this procedure. And in the early days of the company, it allows us to have a lot of flexibility on pricing. We get to establish the price. We'll spend the next couple of years establishing the value of what we provide. I do believe the product will ultimately get reimbursed down the road a ways, but it's not a high priority for us today.
So you've had, shifting to the regulatory landscape, two very different experiences with FDA. With Luminous Medical, which was a continuous glucose monitor for the ICU setting, investors pulled the plug after, I think, 3 tries of getting it through the regulators there. With ReShape, they waived the advisory panel, and I think you went through in something like 11 months. Excuse me. What was the difference this time around? Was it the products? Was it a different regime at FDA? What were the differing factors in those two?
Well, I would give the different regime at FDA a little bit of credit. There actually were some different people and some different thinking people, at least in the gastroenterology division of FDA, some forward-thinking people that actually cared about products being on the market to help patients. That was a unique idea in that group, and I really respect that. This group at FDA, they actually took us behind the scenes one time, and the director of the division took me back there, and he says, look up on that wall there. And he had this sign that said, we're different. So I think they at least thought they were different and had a very different attitude. So when I joined the company, it was after, I think the FDA had not approved a non-surgical obesity device in 25 years. And many companies had failed to meet the hurdles FDA was putting in front of them. But this new regime at FDA was changing their thinking about that. And when I joined, it was sort of like at the cusp. It was going to go one way or the other. If it went the other, well, I joined, and then we shut the company down, and I'm out of there. But it went the right way, and we got an IDE approved, did a study, got our PMA approved, and now we're on the market. The Luminous experience in continuous glucose monitoring, it was a really remarkable situation because there was tremendous data that showed that patients in the ICU go hyperglycemic. When they do, their morbidity and mortality statistics are terrible, and therefore most of those patients get insulin now. IV insulin, a very powerful drug. You have to monitor it all the time. The only way to monitor it is handheld glucose monitor, they're just like what a diabetic patient would use. Tremendously time consuming. So a number of companies set out to solve that problem. Luminous was one of them. I think it was about 6-7 years ago now, there was a New York Times article where the FDA commissioner said our #1 priority is to get these products on the market so we can save lives in the ICU. So we go to FDA with a product, very innovative, automatic withdrawal and return of blood, measurement of glucose, all automatic. You get a real-time glucose anytime, and more accurate as accurate as the laboratory results. And the FDA basically said, wow, that's really new. Never seen anything like that. Don't quite know what to do with that. We might be able to approve that at some point, but we don't really know the path for that. So we recommend you wait a while or do something different. So we did something different. We went through 2 more iterations of the product. We're trying to respond to FDA regulatory requirements, and at the end of the day, they said, yeah, that's really good. I think you got the product that we want, but we don't really know what level of performance we need for this particular category of glucose monitor, even though we already use this one that's well established, and ours is better than that. They said, we don't know how good it needs to be. I said, well, when will you know? And they said, well, we don't really know when we'll know. I happened to be in a position where I had to raise money. So I go to my investors and I go, well, we don't really know what we need to do or when we can do it, but wouldn't you like to invest in that? And the answer was no, so we ended up closing that company down. 6 other companies, there were 7 companies all attempting to go after that same target. 6 of them closed within 2 years. One's still out there and still trying, and they haven't got a product in the market yet. It's still not approved by FDA, but I mean, all power to them.
On a personal level, how did you deal with I imagine that must be just extraordinarily frustrating.
6 years of hard work with an innovative product to save lives, and to be thwarted by bureaucratic nonsense, literally, and incompetence at FDA was incredibly frustrating. And I actually retired after that and said, I'm done. I really don't want to do this anymore, until ReShape came along. And then I got very excited about ReShape and decided I'm not really retired yet, came back.
I'd like to ask you both about your top hits and misses in the medtech arena. And do the high points have anything in common? And do your low points have anything in common? And sort of what lessons do you draw from your successes and from your failures? And Wilson, can we start with you on that? From
a success perspective, I was fortunate enough to work with Tom Fogarty early on in my career. I thought I was going to save the world. After med school, went to Africa, came back and realized the world didn't want to be saved, and not by me. And he took me under his wing and taught me everything I needed to know: how to read a patent, how to really organize a medical device company, how to sell, how to market. And we developed a company and sold to Boston Scientific, and it was really the most exciting experience I ever had. And it was to the point, the company that we were selling, if we had not sold it, within 30 days we would have to shut the doors. And he's a very difficult negotiator, and he made them come back 4 times, increasing their valuation, not knowing behind the scenes that we were, almost at insolvency. So that was really the most exciting.
Sounds like that could be the high and the low.
It was the high and the low. The low was we was part of a startup that the technology was way too early for its time. It was an innovative orthopedic robotics company, the first surgical robot in the U.S. or in the world. And we couldn't get investors really in love with it in the U.S. It was very popular in Germany, very, very popular in Japan, but we just could not get the FDA or the investment community behind it in the U.S.
What did you learn from that?
That it's not about the technology, it's about how you frame the debate, and he who frames it first wins.
What about you, Rick?
Well, I think from the highs, I'm hoping ReShape will be the big high. We'll see how that goes. But the other previous big high was LifeScan. I was a co-founder of LifeScan in 1981. We sold that to Johnson & Johnson in 1986. $6 million invested, sold it for 103, which back in those days was a lot of money. And then I stayed another 7 years and became president of the division and number 1 in the world in the blood glucose monitoring field, which is up until the recent change in reimbursement was a fantastic growing field. What that has in common with ReShape actually is they're both consumer-oriented medical devices, and I have to say I really enjoy that aspect of the medical device industry, because at least in these two businesses, you get to have a direct relationship with the people who benefit from the product. It's not just I made the surgeon more effective, or I let him do something, I enabled the surgeon or the doctor to do something. We actually could do it, and we would see the results. We would talk to the patients, and we would get feedback from the patients, and we knew we were making lives better. And with LifeScan by the millions, ReShape may also someday be by the millions, and I really like that part of it. It's very gratifying.
What about your low point? I take it Luminous. I mean,
Well, Luminous was a pretty low point.
Pushed you into retirement. So.
The other one that I would mention, Aerodyne was moderately successful as a company. We sold it. We took it public very early, did pretty well initially, developed an inhalable insulin product along with a few others. I ended up selling that off to Novo Nordisk and did okay with that. The thing that I didn't like about that, and I would never do again, is have a company that was dependent on another company to be successful for me to be successful. Because then you have to remain, your strategies must be aligned. And a small startup company having an alignment with a major pharmaceutical company and staying in a line is a really difficult challenge, and it didn't work very well in that case.
So you've been in diabetes and obesity space for a long time now. And is it the sort of interaction directly with patients that's the appeal to you in that space, or?
I think that is the big appeal. Everybody's in the medical field because you make people better. I mean, we wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't for that. We'd go do easier stuff. And you really do get that direct relationship, and whether it's through the market research or through the customer service lines and just listening or even talking to patients on the customer service lines, or going into the practices and meeting with patients that are using your product, it's, they tell you what they think, what they like, what they don't like, but mostly they tell you the stories about how you've changed their lives, and I really do like that. And in the obesity space, it's very dramatic. The change you can make in a person's life is really important, and it's what gets you up and keeps you going.
Wilson, what about for you? You spoke a little bit about sort of the convergence of the different monitoring technologies. Is it that side of it that's the appeal to you in the space you're in?
I think it's for trying to reshift the paradigm from being fairly siloed in its approach. So medicine, engineering, everything seems to follow kind of internal focusing specialties versus externally focusing terms of use. So within the hospital environment, I don't think it's important to focus as the hospital, but focus on the patient experience as it may pass through the hospital to the home, to their activity levels, to the gym or wherever else they are, really from cradle to grave. So really understanding not only from a data perspective of what data they're generating along that path, but really understanding what their unique experience is for each level of touch.
In your view, and I'll get to both of you on this, we're in a pretty unprecedented, almost merger and acquisition spree almost on every tier of the device industry. What do you think is driving it? Is it a bubble? If it's a bubble, when's it going to burst?
You got me.
Why don't you go first?
Well, from our perspective, I don't think there's a better investment than ourselves, so I'd rather spend the money there. If there is interesting technology out there, I think you see a lot more consolidation than you're seeing really true people buying innovation. And I think the regulatory environment is kind of the spoiler to it. If you look at all these miraculous apps that are out there to try to help manage healthcare, none of them are really being acquired. They're venture-backed to a certain level. Most of the venture companies now are not or the VCs are not funding A rounds. So it's groups like, Fogarty has his fund that starts with these angels groups. It's a lot of these smaller angel groups that are funding this. So I'm not really sure it's really truly M&A for growth perspective versus M&A for top line coverage.
I don't think I can really speak to the market in general in this category. I can tell you that In the bariatric space, it's a string of failures so far. Right? There's never been a really truly successful. Maybe a lap band at Allergan was one successful product that now is almost gone.
Right. They sold it. Right?
They sold
got
it
rid
off,
of
and it's just declined to nearly nothing now. But other than that, there's been a string of failures, and we're the first ones to really come to market with a product in a long, long time. Will we be successful is the big question. But every major medical device is asking that question, and they're interested in, as this is a white space, that they want to be in, because it is the largest healthcare problem in the world. So in this case, I think acquisitions are it'll be an active area, but I think the public market's probably open as well.
So you've both had success on raising investment. What should every medical device executive in a startup company know in order to achieve success raising money in the climate today, when VC is chary of early stage investment, you've got strategics stepping in to fill some of that gap, but it's hard out there. What's your advice?
Very often you have to deal with what you're handed, so you don't really, you just have to put together the best picture you can for the investors. But if you have choices, show them something that they've already seen. The VC community in particular tends to want to invest in things they've done before. So if you've got the slightly better stent, they still probably invest in that. They like stuff like that, rather than, here's a whole new thing I've never run across before in my career, I'll jump into that. You don't see that very often.
So Wilson, you said earlier that sort of framing the story is key. And obviously that's even more key if you have something that's not as iterative as the next new stent. How do you go about setting up that frame?
Well, it's interesting. We some years ago with a startup, we were shopping it around to get some funds, and we had a meeting with Brooke Breyer, and we did a little homework ahead of time and found out that his interest really was about specializing or looking at personalized medicine. So we reframed our pitch relative to personalized medicine. At the end of it, he took my tie and cut it off, and he said, "You'll never wear a tie again." We're finding it. So I think it's important to understand your audience and understand what their interest level is. But if they're funded for other stents, then this is a slightly different one that may be a good adjacency.
Except they probably won't do a fifth.
They won't do a fifth, but if it's an adjacency to it,
Yeah.
where they see an opportunity,
something that's familiar.
and if that last company got acquired, and they may see this as a way to sell again to that same company, a line extension or some sort of adjacency, I think that'd be key. But if you're not framing it in light of what they're competent with, it'd be really hard for them to step outside that box.
Well, that is all the questions I have.
It's late.
It's like.
It's late. Okay, well, that'll do it then.